It's Women's History Month, and we must lift up the extraordinary women leaders that have led our centuries-long movement for Black liberation and reparations. Thank you to attorney Nkechi Taifa and author Jessica M. Mitchell Arwar for joining us this month for an educational and inspiring presentation lifting up women, our ancestors, who have laid the groundwork for the work we are leading together today. I'm going to go ahead and move straight into our presentations. And our presenters are no stranger to any of us. One is an absolute icon, Queen Attorney Nkechi Taifa, and the other is in that same vein, author, incredible leader, and we're really excited to have them present on the closing of Women's History Month.
Okay, so I wanted to start with the story of Belinda Royall, or Belinda Sutton. She's one of the she has one of the earliest slave narratives and is among one of the first people that historians acknowledge have called for reparations in America. She was born in Ghana sometime around 1713, and she is taken and brought to America in Massachusetts and is enslaved by the Royall estate and is owned by Isaac Royall Jr. from 1737 to 1781. Now, this estate has the most amount of enslaved Africans in the state of Massachusetts. They're the largest slaveholders in the state. They gained their wealth from slavery, sugar, and rum. I have sugary there. Oh gosh, typo. During the American Revolution, Isaac Royall Jr., he flees, and during this time, he tells some of his family members to sell off the enslaved people, some of the enslaved people that he has, so he can get some additional money, because he flees to Nova Scotia and then eventually ends up back in London because he's a loyalist, and he is beholden to the British. But one of the interesting things that he does is, in his will, he gives Belinda Sutton, or at this time she's Belinda Royall, her freedom. He writes in his will that she is to go to his daughter if she doesn't want to be freed. But if she does want to be freed, free her, and because I don't want her to end up under the town, and give her money so that she can take care of herself. So he writes this in his will that he does want Belinda to be freed, taken care of. This was written around 1778. He dies in 1781. The will also ironically gives money to Harvard University, which establishes their first law professorship at Harvard, where they have the Royal Chair. I think they may have even changed the name now, but there was a law professorship under the name the Royal Chair. In 1783, Belinda Royall, she petitions Massachusetts General Court for reparations, so that she can get the money that is due to her from this estate. And she possibly has got assistance from Prince Hall, who's the father of Prince Hall Masonry, the father of Black Masons. She could not read or write, so she definitely did get assistance with this. The Massachusetts legislature did approve an annual pension of 15 pounds and 12 shillings that is going to be paid from the estate. We know that she did at least receive one payment. She also received some additional money from another royal family member, but she has to go back to the court multiple times for back pay and petitioning for this money. So whatever, we're unsure of the full amount that she actually received, but we know that she didn't receive all of the money that she was owed, even with the approval But this still is a significant story. This is the 1700s. Um, this is an African woman born in the western region of Africa around Ghana and Nigeria to petitioning in front of a high court for repair. So this is one of the leading stories, the beginning stories for the fight for reparations in America. So this is just a screenshot of Harvard Law School last year pledging $500,000 because there's still the Royal House and the slave quarters still exist as a museum in Medford, Massachusetts. We also have the story of Callie Guy House. She was, oops, let me go back. She was enslaved near Nashville, Tennessee, born around 1861. She was married with 5 children later on and became a washerwoman. This is after emancipation. In 1896, she co-founded the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association with Isaiah Dickerson, and then they chartered the organization in 1898. She starts out as a secretary, but then she becomes the head of the organization, traveling across the South, educating people on the fight for reparations, getting people to join in on the fight for reparations. And at some point, the membership is as high as 300,000 members. Now, of course, a Black woman formerly enslaved in the South advocating and pushing for reparations is going to get pushback from the powers that be. So she is harassed by local and federal authorities and is eventually convicted by an all-white jury and imprisoned for mail fraud in Jefferson City, Missouri, because they said she was lying to the formerly enslaved people and saying that and riling them up and telling them that reparations were coming, and they didn't like that, so they indicted her and imprisoned her for mail fraud. After she finished her sentence in Jefferson City, Missouri, about, I believe, 2 years later, she passed away from cancer. I wanted to also include the story of Sojourner Truth. We know her as the magnificent abolitionist and preacher. She was Dutch American. Her prior name was Isabella van Wagenen. She got into an argument with her former enslaver over the New York anti-slavery law of 1827, which was supposed to lead to her emancipation, but because they didn't want to free her, she self-emancipated and then went to work for the Van Wagenen family, where she also received financial assistance from them. And she's mostly known for that 1851 Women's Rights Convention speech where it says, "Ain't I a woman?" But it's likely, according to historians, that is probably not what she said, because again, she was not of Southern heritage. She was a Dutch American, and that dialect is inaccurate, just so that people know she probably never said, "Ain't I a woman?" But even though she was most famous for that, news emerged in the last 2 years of this incredible historic case where in 1828 she becomes the first Black woman to win a legal victory against a white man to get the freedom of her family. And they have the documents in the Schomburg Center. It was just a couple of years ago that a researcher unearthed these documents and were able to learn more about this case and learn more about the history that she made that many of us never knew ever occurred. So at some time around 1797, she's born. She has later on in the 1800s, she has her infant daughter. She leaves She goes and works for the Van Wagner family. Her former enslaver has her son Peter. Now, at the time, New York had those laws where they were phasing out slavery. And there was supposed to be a time cutoff where children at the time would be considered indentured servants, and then as they reach a particular age they would be free. They wouldn't be under chattel slavery anymore. But what happened is her son was illegally sold into slavery in Alabama, and so he didn't get to become that indentured servant and stay in New York. And so she was able to get lawyers, two lawyers. She also had the help from the Van Wagner family, and she was able to successfully sue to get her son returned to her. So he was first brought back to New York, and then at some point, a commissioner in New York officially declared her son free from slavery. So this is also an incredible case for abolition, but also repair.
My remarks are going to center on women in the modern era of reparations movement that I personally walked with, learned from, sat at their feet of, organized with, who were part of NCOBRA in the very early days. Many of them were founders, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, all who followed the examples of women upon whose legacy they stood that Jam just mentioned, Belinda Royal Sutton and Henrietta Wood and Callie House, and most influential Queen Mother Audley Moore, upon whose shoulders we all stand. I mean, we all know about John Conyers. Everybody knows about John Conyers, but most of us don't know Marsha Rika J. Wanser, Dorothy Tillman, Lady Claudia Nelson, Diana Kimball, Arlene Rico, and Jerry Algani, or even the ones that I'm going to focus on today, Queen Mother Dorothy Benton Lewis, Ajua Ayatoro, Janita Scott Obadeli, and Kapenda Olusegun. But it's important that we know about people who some are ancestors and some are here walking along besides us, but we don't know their names because many times Black women are marginalized or erased from history. And I'm just going to touch on Queen Mother in terms of some areas that most folk probably don't know about. And her book, Ashley Farmer's book, will be coming out, a biography on Queen Mother soon. So Queen Mother hopefully will be plastered all over, since then. But we've already know and have heard that Queen Mother Audley Moore was an ardent supporter and follower of the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey and United Negro Improvement Association. And when the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa was in its formative stages, she associated herself with the Henry brothers, i.e. Milton Henry, Richard Henry, also known as Gaidi Obadeli, and Imari Obadeli, that was part of the Malcolm X Society. And when the Declaration of Independence for the Republic of New Africa was signed in Detroit on March 31st, 1968, Queen Mother Moore's signature was the first. Okay, and assuring that within the New African Declaration of Independence, it basically said, we claim no rights from the United States other than those rights belonging to oppressed people wherever they may be in the world. And these include the right to damages, reparations due us for the grievous harms sustained by our ancestors and ourselves by reason of U.S. lawlessness. Queen Mother Moore also inspired the first street action of the Republic of New Africa, a reparations petition campaign in 1968 in about 10 cities coast to coast. She was also influential throughout the 80s in the African National Reparations Organization, who was holding nationwide hearings on reparations led by the African People's Socialist Party. And she would often say, there wasn't nothing to do but to get into the struggle. And although her health started to fail several years after the founding of NCOBRA, she was a prominent supporter of this new coalition, gracing her presence at many of the early conventions. And I had the opportunity to put my baby daughter in 1994 in her arms in NCOBRA convention in Detroit. And yeah, I did. That is a picture I did in Pat Snap. So her motivation, was phenomenal. And following her footsteps were many outstanding women who were and are part of NCOBRA. Indeed, from the inception of NCOBRA, women have been an integral and intimate part of its development. Black female participation in leadership was encouraged instead of the traditional backseat and secretarial type of positions. Yet, despite their invaluable contributions, women in the reparations movement often face marginalization and, yes, again, erasure within mainstream narratives and sometimes even movement narratives. And so the struggle for recognition and representation remains. Just a little bit of them right now. Some are ancestors and some are still living. And some of this comes from a book, Eight Women Leaders of the Reparations Movement, that was written by Linda Allen Eustace and Imari Obadele in the year 2000. But I want to touch on Dorothy Lewis first, very, very briefly.
Ask the U.S. government, why have you taken 135 years and you still haven't paid your debt to the people that you kidnapped and brought to this country? Anytime you have to depend on the country that enslaved you to feed, clothe, and shelter you, you are still a slave. There were 4 million slaves at the end of emancipation. We still have 2 million slaves in American prisons. They are our concentration camps.
She had been a reparationist since elementary school in Alaska. She had to endure discussions on the benefits of slavery to those enslaved, taught from the slave owner's perspective. And sometimes she was only the Black child in class and found it very painful. She later was a member of the NAACP in Fairbanks, Alaska, when the chapter was asked to support the Alaskan Natives' land claims against the U.S. government. And you see, the U.S. Government, when it brought Alaska from Russia, they had totally ignored the land rights and existence of indigenous Alaska Native peoples. So the Fairbanks NAACP voted to support the Alaskan Natives' land claim and further agreed that not only was a land claim in order, but a labor claim for Black people as well. And so although the NAACP was able to get support from the national office, National NAACP, for the Alaska Native Lands claim, not for the labor claim for Black. So it's like decades later that NAACP came on board with respect to reparations for Black. So then Dorothy came to the United States. She continued her advocacy for reparations for Black folk. She started an organization with Irvin Davis called the Black Reparations Commission, BRIC. She looked around to see who else was working on the issue, connected with us. She became a judge with the Republic of New Africa. She worked as part of the RNA Foreign Affairs Task Force. She worked with the African National Reparations Organization under the leadership of African People's Socialist Party. And it's been said that she is the one that reached out to RNA President Imari Obadele to call a meeting to bring together reparations-loving people to Washington, which later became known as NCOBRA. And Dorothy was, I think, the first female national co-chair of NCOBRA, and she authored many, many pamphlets. That brings me to Adjoa Ayatoro. Adjoa Ayatoro is still very much living and with us. I call her a masterpiece. In the mid-'80s, she became my mentor in the practice of law. I was a baby lawyer just out of law school, and I was her mentor in the Black nationalist and reparations movement. She introduced me to the legal activist world of the National Conference of Black Lawyers. Through her, I became acquainted with its great leaders such as Hayward Burns, Leonard Hines, Charlie Roach, Margaret Burnham. I introduced Adjoa to the revolutionary world of Black nationalists, reparations, political prisoners. And I think it was her openness to these politics that really was what brought NCBL on board to support reparations. I admired her legal acumen and her openness towards the issue of reparations. And during that time, again, one of the foremost experts espousing reparations was none other than Brother Imari Obadele. So it was Adjoa who engineered the Harvard Conference, NCBL conference, that brought together Imari Obadele, Chokwe Lumumba, Richard America, and myself to Harvard to talk about the issue of reparations. And it was that convening really that ended up leading to the formation of NCOBRA, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. Adjoa was also during NCOBRA, she was a female co-chair, and she was the chief strategist for the NCOBRA Legal Strategies Commission, which we came up with those 5 injury areas that we talk about within NCOBRA, which again sought to offset the legal claim of statute of limitations, because we said reparations was not just for the slavery era, but for its continuing legacies that last down through today: wealth, poverty, health, education, mass incarceration, criminal punishment system, and self-determination.
Thank you to the women leading the reparations movement today. Women making history. Women led the passing of the nation's first tax-funded local reparations legislation, as well as the first statewide task force for reparations, founding organizations that resourced the movement, influencing institutional commitment for reparations, demanding legislative efforts at a state, local, and federal level. We are leading advocacy efforts and building mass movements and much more, all while nurturing our families and communities and showing up with grace and making space for joy. Happy Women's History Month.